Hello, Assalamu alaikum, and peace and blessings upon you. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. My name is Lina. I'm the programs manager at IFSSA, and it's my pleasure to introduce today my colleague Fatima Dini. Fatima joined us as a Building Roots lead, and she comes to us with a very diverse background in both healthcare and in law. She also has a very rich volunteer experience background, particularly working with refugees. I'll turn things over to Fatima. Oh, Fatima, we can't hear you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much, Lina. I'm very excited to be here today and to be part of the IFSSA family, and I'm looking forward to working with many of you this year, inshallah. And we would like to start our presentation with a prayer for the land and the people.
We begin first in the name of God, who is known throughout history and the world by many names, and who has revealed that he is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most gracious, the most merciful. We thank God for his graciousness and mercy with us and those who have come before us, and ask that he bless this gathering and the land upon which this gathering is held. A land we recognize as the ancestral land of the indigenous people, the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwa, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others to whom we are bound by treaty, our shared humanity, and a sacred call to brotherhood, sisterhood, and civic duty. May God in his graciousness and mercy support us all in our work upon this land and with each other. We begin first in the
So few housekeeping items before we start this presentation. We will first like to remind you that we're all here for the same reason. We're here to work together and to accomplish our mutual aim for supporting people in crisis. That has been said, as an organization, we acknowledge that we have a limitation of support that we can provide, and we are upfront with them. Today, our focus will be on providing general information on the sponsorship process and updates on our new system, and we will not be able to address case-specific questions. If you have any, please feel free to email us at refugee@islamicfamily.ca. And if you have general questions about the process, please use the YouTube live chat box on the right side hand, and we will do our best to answer your questions. If we don't get the chance to answer your question, please check the FAQ section on our website. We frequently update it. So this year we're introducing a new system, and that will allow you to save your work and to fill out your application and gradually and come back to it. If you wish to fill out your application in one setting, you can also do that. And we estimate that it will take you around an hour to complete the application if you have all information handy. So what's new? So the IFSSA sponsorship application is now open for 2022. You can find it on our website at islamicfamily.ca/sponsorship, and the application will be closed on March 4th. We have a strict deadline as we want to allow our committee to have a sufficient time to process the applications. So the new tool that we're introducing this year, it's the SurveyMonkey Apply, and we decided to make this shift to effectively manage our sponsorship applications and to easily adapt the new guidelines by RCC. RCC stands for Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, and every year they have a specific guidelines and requirement that we need to accommodate, and the system would allow us to do so. If you can navigate the SurveyMonkey Apply directly from our website. We also have an online video posted that will walk you through it, so please watch it. And if you have any specific questions, again, email us. The first thing that you will be asked to do is to create a password and a username, and please keep those safe as you will need them to frequently access the site. Now I will pass things to Lina.
Thank you, Fatima. So like Fatma mentioned, SurveyMonkey has many features, and we customized it to fit our needs as a sponsorship agreement holder as a SA. For now, the site allows you to determine if you're eligible for sponsorship, and if you are, it lets you complete and submit your application right there within the system. If you are approved for sponsorship, it will also let you, the site will allow you to use it to complete your IRCC application. You'll be able to use it to communicate with volunteers and with staff and to track the progress of your application. You would also be able to submit documents and complete a lot of post-arrival tasks right there within that same system. After the refugees arrive, you'll be provided with a checklist of settlement tasks that you need to complete. And we would ask you to submit proof of completion for both payment, financial tasks, as well as settlement tasks. So a little bit more about the sponsorship process, the timeline that we're working with this year and what it would look like, so you know what to expect. If we're going to dig deeper into the sponsorship process, it starts first with the submission of the IFSSA application, and that's the portion that you're working on now. The application includes questions about you, the sponsor. It also includes questions about the refugee or refugees that you're hoping to sponsor. The settlement plan for the refugees when they arrive to Edmonton is also included in that application. All the submitted applications are reviewed internally to ensure that they're eligible according to the IRCC or Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada requirements. We ask that you be truthful in the submission that you send to us, so it helps us determine if you're eligible or not. If the system lets you know that the information you entered makes you ineligible for sponsorship, please do not proceed with the application unless your conditions change. If that is the case and your conditions do change and you want to submit for sponsorship, we ask that you contact us at refugee@islamicfamily.ca within the time window when the application is open. If you're unsure of the eligibility requirements or if you have any questions about them, we are hosting a second town hall next Saturday, February 19th. It will be at 1 p.m. You can join in a similar process to how you did today. And that town hall will be specifically dedicated to the eligibility and admissibility requirements. So we'll address all of those in that town hall. So moving on to the next step in the process, for eligible applications, we hand them over to an external committee to review them. The committee determines which applications are approved for sponsorship based on a thorough assessment of both the refugees' needs and the sponsor's capabilities. Staff and volunteers are not involved in this decision-making process, and we make no exceptions in that regard. So all applicants are informed on whether or not they've been accepted or approved for that year, or if they were rejected. For approved sponsors, they are at that point invited to complete their IRCC applications. So those are the government applications. This is done with help from volunteers and staff, and all applications are reviewed and submitted to the IRCC. This process is very lengthy, so we ask that you be patient with us. You'll be notified if the IRCC requests any additional information for your file, if your file is approved or rejected. If it is approved, we will be asking you to deposit the 1-year sponsorship cost in trust with IFSSA. The money will be dispensed to monthly installments directly to the refugees when they do arrive to Canada. After the IRCC approves your application, it is sent to an overseas visa office for final approval. The visa office conducts interviews with the refugees that you're sponsoring to determine the final eligibility and admissibility. They'll also undergo medical and security checks before they come. So I just wanted to showcase really quickly the minimum financial support calculator that we use for our purposes. You'd be able to find this on the RSTP website, and you can use it to estimate the amount that you'll be required to deposit with IFSSA. Please keep in mind that the amount that you see from this calculator is only an estimate because it's likely to increase by the time the refugees arrive, and you would be liable for that increase. So moving over to what I would say is probably the final step in the process, as we move closer to the post-arrival. So your main role as a sponsor technically begins when the previous steps have all been completed. So you continue to work with IFSSA staff very closely after the refugees arrive. We track the settlement progress, and we ask for documentation to prove that certain tasks have been completed. This is really essential because the IRCC, or the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, does random file reviews, and we have to make sure that we have all the documentation needed. Sponsors are required to complete all post-arrival tasks and check-ins, and post-arrival tasks include anything from orienting the new refugees to Edmonton, to helping them get their documents like social insurance numbers, healthcare cards, PR cards in order, all the way to getting them registered in schools and English language classes and finding recreation opportunities. So the list is pretty comprehensive. So moving over to some changes that will be taking place this year, that if you're familiar with our sponsorship process are a little bit different from what you've experienced in the past. So the sponsorship process this year will involve some one-on-one coaching that we will be doing with the sponsors. Anyone who's successful in their IRCC application, in their submission with the IFSSA process, will be coached prior to submitting to the IRCC. The coaching will include both settlement on financial tracking and a better understanding of how that process works. We are also asking now that the sponsorship costs be deposited with IFSSA. This is something that we started last year and will be continuing with. For the time being, the cost that you're asked to deposit is the monthly cost. So this is what the calculator shows you as the monthly installments. We're not asking for the startup costs at this point, but we might, depending on IRCC and changes with the IRCC. We also do post-arrival check-ins periodically. So those check-ins are done with the refugees and with the sponsors, and those are also a requirement of our sponsorship process. So this is the end of our town hall for today. We ask you to type any questions that you have in the chat. And as a reminder, we're only addressing questions that relate to the IFSSA sponsorship process that we just discussed. We ask that if you have any questions regarding eligibility or admissibility, that you join us for the town hall next week. And as a reminder, you can always email us at refugee@islamicfamily.ca if you have any case-specific questions. And we ask that you also continue to check that frequently asked questions section because we update that regularly. Thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen now and see if you have any questions.
So we have a question here, and that is, can you help us fill out the application form?
So at this time, we don't help directly with completing the applications because we want to make sure the process is equal for everyone. What we can assist you with is your access to the system. So if you need any help with understanding how to access SurveyMonkey, how to create a username, if you're having difficulty understanding one of the questions, we're able to assist you with that. If you have any questions about those, please email us at refugee@islamicfamily.ca, but we do not provide one-on-one coaching through the application. It's part of our screening process, and we want to make sure it's the same for everyone.
Another question is, can a group of people instead of an individual be a sponsor?
So that's a really great question. At IFSSA, we work with single sponsors. We need one person's name to be on the application. However, on your end, you're able to split the sponsorship, the settlement duties specifically between multiple family members. So once the person or the family arrive, you're able to divide the tasks between you so that each person is taking on a different aspect of their settlement process. For our own purposes internally, we ask that it's one person who's liable for the finances and that we have direct communications with. If you are looking at sponsorship with a group of people, and depending on what documentation the refugee has, we also might encourage you to explore the group of 5 sponsorship because it has a similar setup to that.
So would you be able to walk us through the calculation that you shared previously?
Yes, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to share my screen again. So this is the page that you would be using for the financial support calculation. You can find this, like I said, on the RSTP website. If you look up RSTP calculator, this is the first thing that comes up. The calculator was adapted slightly this year so that it's a little bit more interactive than in the past. You can use it to enter the number of family members that you're hoping to sponsor and to get us an estimate of how much that amount would be. So let's do, for assumption's sake, that we're bringing someone to Alberta, to Edmonton. We don't know when they're arriving. And for the family size, let's assume a family of 3, where we have 2 adults, a regular couple, so they're not as seniors, and with 1 child. And for the child, we could say that the age, for example, is 10 years old. And we just say calculate minimum support. So the calculator is going to show you several numbers here. And they're all of importance to us in different ways. So we're looking at the total for 12 months of income support. This right here is the number you would be required to deposit with IFSSA. For the startup costs that are right here, you are still liable for this number. You're expected to provide this amount of support to the refugees when they come. For now, we're not asking you to deposit this money with us. Instead, what we ask is that you provide us with receipts showing where it was spent and the fact that it was used for the person or family in this case. So in total, the amount that you're liable for for a family of 3 that we just created is 31,108. And again, as a reminder, the amount changes from year to year. So there's likely to be an increase by the time the family or the person that you're sponsoring arrive to Edmonton. So we ask that you budget accordingly because it's likely that you'll be asked for more before they come in.
So we have a question. Someone would like to sponsor, but they cannot do it their own. So do you know any group that will help them?
Yeah, so one of the options on our application for this year, if you're interested in sponsorship and you can't afford the entire process, you can indicate that on your application. As a reminder, that would place you a little bit lower on the scale when you're being graded by the committee because we're prioritizing applications where the sponsor is capable of taking it on their own. If you have a certain amount of money that you're able to put towards a sponsorship and you need assistance with more, you do always have the option of resorting to the community, to asking for people to donate towards your sponsorship. So multiple ways that you can take so that you can collect that sponsorship amount for deposit. If you're relying on IFSSA to assist with it, like I said, there is that caveat where you would be a little bit lower on the list.
Okay, so when are we requiring to complete the finance? And also, can I pay little by little or do I have to pay it all at once?
Yes, so the amount that you're required to deposit with IFSSA will be deposited when you receive your approval from the IRCC. As a rough idea of how the timeline has been working for us this past year, it's been taking from the time of submission to the IRCC about 2 to 3 months for us to receive an approval for that person or family. When we do receive the approval, you have 3 weeks to make the deposit. And again, the deposit is held in trust with IFSSA. You'll be asked to sign a contract. You'll know that we have the amount with us. When the family comes, they receive it in monthly installments. We do ask that it be deposited in one amount so that it's easier for us for tracking, and it's easier on your end to track the amount that you've been giving to us. If you are collecting it from community donations, we have ways to work with you so we can make sure they all come to the same place and they're all accounted for.
So why did you change the sponsorship application this year?
Yeah, so the sponsorship application actually wasn't changed for this year. The application itself is very, very similar to what we had in the past. A few questions here and there have been changed. What we changed primarily was the process. So in the past, the application was housed in a different system from the one that we have now. The reason we opted to do it through SurveyMonkey is because it will let us do and track the entire process within the same system. So in the past, when you submitted an application, you'd have to email us or contact us to find out where your application is, what the timeline looks like, what next steps would be. And in this case, everything will be within the system. So you can log in anytime, see the status of your application, see if it's been reviewed, if any information is required of you. Everything will be housed within SurveyMonkey. Otherwise, the application itself has had very minimal updates to the questions.
Okay. If you have applied before to IFSSA as a sponsor and currently in the process, can you apply again in 2022?
Yes, absolutely. So anyone in the community who's applied to sponsor before or who's actively in a sponsorship is able to apply. The determination, again, is up to the committee that we have, if you are eligible and what your finances and your capabilities look like, given that situation.
Can one sponsor sponsor 2 individuals separately in 2 different applications at once?
So it depends on the composition. So if those 2 individuals are not related, they're entirely separate applications, we ask that you submit 2 separate applications for them for determination. And again, up to the committee, whether or not they decide to accept both, just one or neither. That's something that staff are not involved in.
Okay, if I want to sponsor my family, let's say there are 8 members, my parents and 3 siblings under 20, and 3 siblings, one is 23, 22, and let's say my income is 120K. How much do I have to deposit into IFSSA?
Yeah, so I'd refer you back to the calculator. The same calculator I showed also allows you an option to add dependents who are over the age of majority, so that being 18. So anyone who's over the age of 18, who's in a linked application, you can determine the total amount for them by adding them through that tab on the calculator, and you can find out what the total is that way. And if you have any additional questions about it, if you have more specific details that you need, you can contact us for more information.
Okay, does the refugee have to register with the UN?
So we do not require an RSD or refugee status determination for the purposes of our sponsorship, but you do have to show us that the person meets the definition of a refugee. This is something that we will be addressing in next week's town hall. So I encourage you to attend then, and it'll be addressed in a lot more detail, but that's a quick snippet of how it works. There is a difference between a sponsorship agreement holder and a group of 5 in that case, and we'll be talking about all that next week. It looks like we missed one question. So do I have to deposit into IFSSA account, or is it okay to just show in my income? We do ask that the amount is deposited with IFSSA. So in the past, I know we did it differently. Over the past 2 years, we've been asking that the deposit is with IFSSA. So you're required to put the money in an IFSSA account. And when the refugees come, they receive it in monthly installments from us. So think of it as an income that they get for the first 12 months when they're in Canada.
How many eligible sponsor spots are open for IFSSA in 2022?
So this year from the IRCC, we received 75 spots that will be filled from the applicants that we receive. Just give it a few more minutes. If anyone has any additional questions, please keep them coming. If there's a question that you want to ask that you feel is more specific, you're welcome to always email us. Again, it's refugee@islamicfamily.ca. And we'll give it a few minutes to see if there are any additional questions that come in. Just before we wrap up, I want to remind you that we're hosting a second town hall next week. The town hall will be taking place on Saturday at 1 p.m. That's the 19th. The town hall is going to be co-hosted with the RSTP, or the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program. They'll be doing similar style to today. They'll be doing a quick presentation on what eligibility and admissibility mean, what the requirements for them are, and they'll be taking questions from you. So any questions that you have about those topics, please bring them with you next week. We're excited to have the RSTP with us to help us answer those questions. I'll remind you again about the website as well. So islamicfamily.ca/sponsorship. We continue to update it with any information that we have or anything that we think is relevant to a larger audience. So keep checking that FAQ section. And again, email us if you have any questions that pertain to a specific application or a specific individual. Looks like that's the end of our questions for today. I'm not seeing anything new. So we thank you all for attending. Oh, there's another question.
So what are the criteria for the selecting process?
Yeah, so the selection is done by an external committee. Staff and volunteers are not involved in it. The committee looks at the refugees' circumstances, the severity of their situation, where they are, and they also look at the sponsor's conditions and their capability to support both financially and in terms of settlement. So the criteria is really just built into the application. So your answers are what determines whether or not you're eligible or accepted for that year. I do want to remind you that we have really limited spots. So just because you're not accepted does not mean that you're not eligible for sponsorship. It's only that we have limited spots and we have to prioritize certain applications over others. But those are the two main elements that contribute to the selection process. So the refugees conditions and your capabilities as a sponsor.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for attending. We appreciate you coming in and joining us. If you're watching this later, please remember that you have that option of checking FAQ, emailing us, and joining us for the next town hall next week. Thank you to everyone who's come in. We understand this is a very difficult process and it's a very tedious one to navigate. So please continue to stay in touch with us if you have any questions. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.